continuing our series in Revelation. So we're still in chapter 2. We're going to finish chapter 2 tonight. So we're 6 weeks into this thing and we're not out of the second chapter. How about that? But that's what Wednesday night is for, is we're digging in and going line by line and learning it as we go. So that's okay. So we're studying the letters to the 7 churches, and we've made it through a few of them so far. And this week, the weeks leading up to this, we've learned that each of these letters kind of follow the same format. There's an introduction that Jesus introduces himself, and then, as you can see here, there's positive, and there's some negative things. Not in all of the churches. Some of them have all of these. Some of them have only positive. Actually, only 2 of the 7 churches have only positive things and no negative, and those just so happen to be the smaller, poorer churches. The rest of them have both positive and negative, and then Jesus gives them some instructions or warnings, and then he makes some promises, and those promises can sometimes sound really nice, and then sometimes those promises are judgments, like I promise I'm going to come deal with you if you don't change, right? So we're not in the meek and mild Jesus. That's not what Revelation is trying to present to us. So in each of these letters, we see these things. All of these are going to be in the letter we're going to read tonight, and we'll dig into that more as we go. So we're going to talk about the church in Thyatira. You want to try to say that? Thyatira. Yeah. Thyatira. Yeah. So in Taylor County, it's Thyatira. But in Greek, it's Thyatira. You have to roll the R. Can you roll your R's? How many of you can roll your R's? Okay. Wow. A minority of you. Okay. All right. So for you, it's Thyatira. All right. Thyatira is, last week we talked about Pergamum. The letters are in this order. This is a mail route in the ancient world, in ancient Asia Minor. So if you remember, John is here on Patmos, this island about 60 miles from Ephesus. So he writes the letter there, sends it to Ephesus, and then it goes all the way around this route. So we're in Thyatira tonight, and I'll give you some historical background. This is the only part of the old city we have you can go look at today. Whereas all the other ones I've been showing you, I've had multiple pictures of the theater and the Acropolis and the temples and all that kind of stuff. But in this city, and if you watch the video that I posted on Faith Life, the guys were walking around this area in the video, and the guy told you, if you notice, there's, the modern city is built all the way around this thing. So if you were to tear down the modern buildings and dig up the concrete, you would find more of the ancient city. So in a lot of these cities, they don't value the ancient stuff as much. They just build on top of it. And it's always been that way in the ancient world. If you do archaeology, whatever's there you dig, and then you find the next layer. There's another, 2 or 3 centuries earlier, there's a whole nother layer of civilization there. That's just how we do. We just build on top of things. So this is the only thing that's left. What you see right here is a Byzantine era church. So this was actually, even though this was a pagan city in John's day, when John is writing, this is a totally pagan city. But a few centuries later, Christianity has taken over the whole Roman Empire. So a lot of these Greek temples get reformed into Christian churches. So like a lot of the pictures I've been showing you from the other cities where all those temples are, most of them got reworked into Christian churches. So like the Temple of Artemis would have housed Christian churches at some point when Christianity took over the Roman Empire. So that's what these ruins right here are from that era. They're not from the 1st century. But a lot of these columns and stuff that you see scattered around, those are from the 1st century, from John's day. But there's not a whole lot to see there with this city because they've built a new one on top of it. So there's just not, unfortunately, this is the only thing I have to show you on that. But let me give you some historical context about this city in the 1st century, and then we'll dig into the scripture. Sound good? Okay. Thyatira, I'm going to speak your language. Thyatira was a wealthy city in the ancient world. They were known for 2 major things that they produced. Textiles, so they did a lot of fabrics, especially purple fabrics, and bronze armor. Now, did any of you read the letter to Thyatira before you came here tonight? Okay, no one does their homework. That's wonderful. If you had, when I said bronze armor, you would have thought, that's connected because I read the word bronze in the passage. That's why I want you to do your homework so you can make those connections. But that's okay. We'll spend more time so I can make them for you. So these major exports that they had were these purple fabrics and all kinds of fabrics, but they were popular for their purple ones. And then they had a lot of bronze smiths who made armor. So they made helmets and shields and all kinds of stuff. And ancient coins from this city, one side would usually have the emperor or one of the gods on it. The other side, like the tails side, would have a bronze smith hammering a helmet. So that was so common and so popular in this city that it was even on their money. That's what they did. They were actually so wealthy, this city was, that they had their own currency for a long time. So they minted their own currency, which is why they were able to put their own images and stuff on it. So this is a wealthy city. Like I said, one of the most popular fabrics they had was purple fabric that was made from the madder root, and don't ask me what all that is. But they had a different way of making something purple than the Egyptians did, and they could do it cheaper. So they were very well known for this because it actually ended up kind of overtaking the other fabrics that were on the market because it was a little bit cheaper. Now, if you want to know, like, well, where is there anywhere else in the Bible where this city is mentioned? It actually is. In Acts chapter 16, the Apostle Paul meets a woman named Lydia. If you remember Lydia in the scripture. And she's a person from Thyatira, and she makes purple fabrics. That's her job. She produces them and sells them. And she becomes a Christian. They share the gospel with her. She becomes a believer. I should say she becomes a disciple. I don't like to use the word Christian. And they baptize her and her entire household. So her whole family becomes believers. And she actually invites Paul and everybody who's with him to stay in her home. And they stay there, and she kind of hosts some of the apostles for a while. Her and her family did anyway. And she was probably, most likely, the first Christian convert in this city. Was a woman named Lydia who makes purple fabrics. So there's another connection in your scripture. Now, as with a lot of the churches in Revelation that we've read about so far, the church in this city struggled with staying faithful to Jesus, and they struggled with some immorality issues. So we're gonna see that as we read along. Okay, ready to read the Bible? Yeah, let's do that. Okay, so here's the introduction of the Son of Man. Remember, every one of these letters starts with Jesus introducing himself, and he's pulling phrases from the vision that he gave John of himself in chapter 1. And each thing he picks relates to something in that city or in that church. So that's going to be true here too. So he says, to the angel of the church at Thyatira, write, the words of the Son of God. Now, if you're writing in your Bible, just I don't know, put a star or something by that. This is the only time in the book of Revelation that Jesus is called Son of God. He's called a lot of things in Revelation. This is the only time it mentions Son of God. And I thought that was interesting. So I went looking and trying to figure out why is that. And this is just an opinion, okay? So I'm telling you that up front. My opinion is Revelation is not designed, the purpose of Revelation is not for Jesus to reveal himself as God's son, but as God's conquering warrior who's conquering the enemy, and we can conquer if we're faithful to him. So the picture in Revelation of Jesus is not the meek and mild Son of God that we read about in the Gospels. The picture we're getting in Revelation is, yeah, that's what he did during the ministry on earth, but now he's king from heaven. He's sitting at the right hand of God, and he's all powerful, and he's the Alpha and Omega and the first and the last, and he's got a sword coming from his mouth and all that kind of stuff. So this is a picture of Jesus where he's powerful. So that's the only way I can kind of make sense. Why does he not call him the Son of God anywhere else in this book? I think because that's not the focus. The focus here is that he is the king. He's not just the Son of God. He is now reigning as king from the throne, right? Because he's seated at the right hand of God. Okay, so the words of the Son of God, who has eyes like flame of fire. Remember that from chapter 1? And whose feet are like burnished bronze. Bronze. Remember what the two things they were popular for in Thyatira? Fabrics and bronze. Bronze armor, to be exact. And he introduces himself as the Son of God who has flaming eyes, meaning he can see it all, and he's got armor made out of bronze on his feet. And that's a picture, this is all warrior imagery. So he's the warrior who conquers evil. So the reason why he's got metal feet, I think, this is my opinion again, I think is a symbol of him being the head-crushing snake killer. Remember from Genesis chapter 3, there's one who's the seed of the woman who's going to crush the head of the snake while the snake's biting his foot, kind of thing. Well, it's kind of hard for a snake to do any damage to your feet if your feet are bronze, right? So he's stomping, he's the snake crusher, right? I mean, that's like a really cool title for Jesus if you haven't noticed. He's the snake crusher. That's literally who he came to be, right? So he's got feet of burnished bronze. So imagine you're in the first century in this city and you get the letter of Revelation and you find out that there's part of it specifically addressed to your church. And you're like, oh, this is cool. And then you read this line and you're like, oh, bronze. He kind of like knows our business, literally knows our business, right? So your ears are going to kind of perk up when you're listening to whoever is reading this in your church in the first century. All right, so this is a warrior image, and the question is, why does he pick these images for this city? Well, obviously it connects to their trade, their bronze trade, but also he picks certain phrases because of the church's situation. So in one of the other churches, they're going to be persecuted, and some of them are going to be killed for their faith. So Jesus says, I'm the one who died and came back to life. That's what he says to that church, because he knows they're going to be killed for their faith. So he's providing encouragement. I died and came back to life, and so will you. Right? I'm going to resurrect you in the end. So in this church, all he mentions is judgment language, warrior language. So that kind of is a clue that they probably got some issues that need to be addressed. Does that make sense? All right. So here's the positive stuff he says, and it's very short. Oh, by the way, the letter to Thyatira is the longest letter of the 7. So they got some stuff they need to get worked out. Okay, here's the positive. He says, I know your works. Okay, so they've got some good works, right? And here's what they are. Your love, your faith, and remember the word faith in Greek is pistis, and it means most of the time faithfulness. Sometimes it refers to just believing something, but most of the time in the New Testament it refers to faithfulness. So he says, I know you've got good works. You've got love and faithfulness, or faith, and service. So they're good at serving people, apparently. And patient endurance, which is a major theme in Revelation that goes all the way through. And that your latter works exceed the first. Okay, so if we've got love, sorry for my handwriting, by the way, faith, service, and endurance, your latter works exceed the first. So I think it's probably safe to say these are the first and these are the last. So here's what I think's going on here. He's saying to them, can you even read that? He's saying to them, you've got love, faith, service, and endurance, but your service and endurance has exceeded your love and your faith. To you might think, well, that doesn't really make sense because don't they all flow out of each other? Well, here's what we need to know, and we'll come back to this in the application part at the end. Your good works, you can do them without love and faith, right? Your service to others and your enduring, temptation or persecution, whatever, you can actually do those things without any love and faith. You know that, right? If you think about it in the church context, I can teach without having any love or faith in God. You do realize that people like me can do that, right? We can come up here and look like we have all of our act together, but behind the scenes we don't. It's just true. It is possible. Okay, people can sing in the band and play the instruments and do service without love and faith, right? So in the same way, he's saying to them, like, okay, you're doing pretty good, but your acts of service and your endurance, it's surpassing what really matters, which is your love and faith. And I think these are vertical things. Your love toward God and your faithfulness to him. Your good works are actually fooling you into thinking that your love and faith is in the right place. Does this make sense? So it's kind of hard to explain, but we'll come back to it in the application part. So they've got some good things, right? But he kind of gives you an indication they're already starting downhill. But there's still some faithful people in the church. All right, he says, but I have this against you. So that's how you know we're about to get into the negative. I have this against you, that you tolerate. So you're a tolerant bunch, but you're tolerating the wrong thing. You tolerate that woman Jezebel. And she calls herself a prophetess. So she's not really a prophet, but she likes to call herself that. Okay, and by the way, her name is not really Jezebel. Jesus is using an Old Testament character and comparing, saying this is a woman who acts like Jezebel from the Old Testament. We'll come back to that in a second. Now she calls herself a prophetess, and she's teaching and seducing my servants. So he's saying these are my servants. They're faithful people to me, but she's misleading them. And she's teaching them to practice sexual immorality and to eat food sacrificed to idols. Now, if you remember, these two terms came up in other letters, right? Remember the last letter talked about Balaam. It's like some were following the teaching of Balaam, which is another Old Testament character who led the Israelites to worship other gods by practicing immorality and eating, meals that had been dedicated to idols. Right? So in this letter, it's the same problem that they're having that some of the other churches had. But he connects it to this Jezebel woman. Now, how many of you remember the story of Jezebel from the Old Testament? Okay, a few of you, right? So if you go back, and this is all in your notes, you can read it later during the week. In 1 Kings 16 and in 21, and then 2 Kings 9 will give you a nice overview of what she did. Basically, she did the same thing that Balaam did. She was getting some of the Israelites to worship other gods by doing these sexual acts and eating food that had been offered to idols in worship. So the same thing is going on here, and there's a woman who's leading this charge, and she's apparently got some followers within the church. Okay, so just remember, this doesn't mean that she just lives in the city and she's doing these things. He's writing this to the church, and he's saying, you're tolerating this person that's doing this in your church. So you can see how this would be an issue for Jesus. You can see why this might light up his eyes, and not in a good way, right? So now he says, now I've been patient. I gave her time to repent, but she refuses. That's serious. Like not only is this happening, I've been aware of it, and I've been patiently giving her time, which also probably means that he has used his Spirit to convict this person of her sin and her followers of the sin that they're committing, and he's given them time to repent. Thank God that that's how he works. He gives us time. Just remember, though, there is a limit. Not a limit to his grace, but there is a limit to the amount of time that he will let you destroy yourself and others. Eventually, he has to step in and say, okay, that's enough. This is affecting too many people now. This has got to stop. And he does that from time to time. And he's threatening to do it again. So he says, I gave her time, but she refuses. So if you remember, this is a major problem in several of the churches in Revelation. Now, he's about to say some harsh things. So just preparing you ahead of time. He says, behold, I'm going to throw her on a sick bed. I'm going to make this Jezebel-like prophetess, false prophet. I'm going to actually make her physically sick. And those who commit adultery with her, now it's not very clear here because of the Greek. At least it's not clear to me because I'm not an expert in Greek. But it's not very clear does this mean that the people who are following her teachings were actually sleeping with her? Or is it just saying they're committing sexual immorality in the same way that she is? Okay, so it's not. It could be both. I don't know. It's hard to tell. And John uses a very strange form of Greek in Revelation because he's trying to get this out quick. So anyway, he says, I'm going to make her sick, and the people who commit adultery with her, I will throw into great tribulation. Now, you've probably heard about the Great Tribulation, right? And we've talked about that quite a bit in here. There's no definite article in front of it, so they're just saying I'm gonna throw them into some troubled times. All right? Unless, okay, so there's a way out, unless they repent of what she's doing and what she's teaching them to do. And I will strike her children dead. Hold on, Jesus. Right? I thought you were meek and mild and, dear baby Jesus and wrapped in swaddling clothes. Right? Well, he's not a baby anymore. Now, almost every scholar that I read on this said that, this could be referring to this woman's actual children, but it's actually more likely that this is a metaphor for her followers. So just as a rabbi in the first century would often call his disciples his children, that was normal. This could be the same thing. So it may not be her actual kids, okay? So we don't know for sure, right? We've never met this Jezebel woman to find out, hey, did all your kids die? So we don't know. But I will say this, I just thought of this actually. If you go back to Jezebel's story in the Old Testament, there is a judgment that comes on the king who was tied up with her, and 70 of his sons get killed because of what she's led all of them to do. So, I don't know. I'm just saying it could be her kids, or it could just be the people who are following her teaching. Either way, this is pretty harsh. Yes? Okay, we can just admit there's harsh stuff in your Bible. All right? But remember, he's given them time. And he's still giving them time. He says, look, if you repent, then all is well. But if not, I'm going to have to come stop this. This has to stop. So when you read passages like this and you're like, gosh, I don't know, this sounds pretty rough. This doesn't sound like the kind of God that I like. Well, just let me say a few things about that. We don't get to make up the God that we like. I mean, you can. You can do that. It just won't be the God that actually is real, right? So we don't get to make up our own version of God, and even if you did, that God's going to disappoint you too, right? Because actually, if you make up your own God, then you become your own God, and you will disappoint you. You ever disappointed yourself? Been on a diet? That's the easiest example I got, right? When we read stuff like this and we think, man, this seems really harsh, we have to think about it this way. Okay, I'm going to take you back to the Old Testament for a minute. In the flood story, in Genesis chapter 6, right before Noah's told to build a boat, that there's a flood coming, we're told exactly why this needs to happen. and it's that the entire earth is filled with violence. And in the Hebrew of Genesis 6, it literally says, the end of all mankind has come up before me. Now, a lot of our modern translations translate it, I have determined to put an end. And that is not what the Hebrew says at all. In the Hebrew, it says, the end of all humanity or all of mankind has come up before me. In other words, I've looked at where this is headed, and you're going to exterminate yourselves because the whole earth is filled with violence. You're killing each other, right? So what he does in the flood is he stops the extermination. We think of the flood often as an extermination. No, it's a rescue plan. So he's stepping in and saying, you're all going to kill each other off if I don't stop this. So what he does is he picks Noah, which he calls righteous and blameless, and then he says, okay, I'm going to take you and your family. I'm going to start this project over. I'm going to have to get rid of all the violent people, and we're going to have to start over. That's what God is doing. Now, when you hear it told that way, it makes more sense, doesn't it? It's not that God just got ticked off and decided to kill everybody. It was that God looked down and said, they're going to totally ruin my project of making a beautiful place for these people to live. They're going to exterminate themselves, and this is the only way out. And God knows best. So when we get to passages like this, we have to have all of that context in our head. Okay, so if God's willing to go to this extreme in this church, he must have saw something down the road that was far worse. And he's saying, look, if y'all don't repent, I'm going to have to stop this because I know what it's going to lead to. Make sense? So even the judgment is grace because he's trying to stop what's going on because it's hurting people. Okay? He says, now, if you don't repent and I have to come do all this, all the churches will know that I am he who searches the mind and heart. And I will give to each of you according to your works. All the churches will know. So, for sure, all the 7 churches. So if I come to your city in Thyatira, to your church, and you're not repenting of this, and you're allowing this, and you're tolerating it, and this Jezebel-like woman is leading all these people astray. If you don't repent, I'm going to show up when your time is up, and I'm going to judge your church. And when I do that, all the other churches will know. We better not do what they did. Make sense? Now, in your notes, you'll see I put a reference in there to Acts chapter 5. This is not a new concept. In Acts chapter 5, there were 2 people, Ananias and Sapphira, who sold some property, and then they lied about it. And they lied by saying they gave all the money to the church in Jerusalem. Now, they weren't required to give all the money to the church, were they? No. They weren't required to. They weren't really necessarily required to give a certain amount. They were just supposed to be generous believers who give off of the increase of their household. So now if you think about the 10% tithe and that's your view, that's fine. You can have that. I'm just saying they weren't required to do what they were lying about saying that they did. So they lied and said, we gave all the money to the church. Why do you think they did that? Because they wanted to get recognized. Look what we did. We sold a piece of property and we gave all of it to the church. And other people in the church had already done that. So it's almost like they were trying to keep up with somebody, trying to gain some status. And they lied. And what happened to Ananias and Sapphira? They died on the spot. So one of them, the husband dies, and then Peter goes and knocks on the door of the wife, and he's like, why are you lying? He says, why have you lied to the Spirit of God? It wasn't you lied to us. You lied to God by doing this. And it's so funny. He says, the feet of them who carried your husband out are standing at the door, which I don't know why that's funny to me. Maybe I'm silly, but I'm always like, the feet. It was just the feet. That's freaky. It wasn't just the feet, I'm just saying. It's funny that he says the feet of them. But anyway, and then she falls dead on the spot. And it tells us in that story that fear swept through the church, the entire church. Well, what's going on there? Same thing that's going on here. If I have to judge you, when I do, everybody will know that I can come judge you. So be careful. So this is serious stuff, right? And he says, everybody will know that I search their mind and their heart. That make you nervous? Well, he does do that, by the way. He searches your mind and your heart. And you would do well to spend time every day at some point asking him to do that. Search my mind, search my heart. See if there's any unclean way in me, David wrote. And lead me into the way everlasting. That's a really good process to do every day. Search my mind, search my heart, see if there's anything in there, which there will be, that needs to change so that you can lead me into the way that leads to life. So this is a good thing. We often read this, he searches our mind and our heart, and it scares us, and there's an element to where it should, but it's an act of grace and mercy. Because if he searches our mind and heart, he finds things that are destroying us or destroying those around us. And it's an act of mercy and grace that he wants to come in and change and tweak things to lead you into the way of life. Amen? Yeah. So we should ask for this, right? And he's saying, these people up here quit asking for that at some point, and they went crazy. But when I come and judge them for not repenting, everybody's going to get reminded that I want to search your heart and your mind. And I will give you, what you plant will come up. And it will be what you planted, right? We have this little mini garden at our house now. I call it a mini garden because it really is that. It's only like 2 sections this big because that's all either of us want to manage, right? We're not trying to feed all of Perry. We just want to feed us. So, but anyway, so we planted all this stuff, but we didn't exactly think it through, like to put down anything like, hey, the squash is here and the broccoli is here. So now we got all this stuff coming up, and we're like, well, yeah, not sure what any of this is, you know. That kind of looks like cucumbers, I think, because it's just sprouts right now, so they kind of all look similar. But here's how it works. What you plant is what comes out of the ground, right? So if we sow or plant things that lead to destruction, they come up and lead to destruction, right? You can't plant apples and get oranges, okay? So if we plant the wrong things like these people were doing, this is what we can expect. And we can't be ticked off at God when destruction comes. But I'm seeing a lot more that this is what happens in our modern Christianity. Who was it? Was it Adrian Rogers or Charles Stanley that said we spend all week sowing our wild oats and then we go to church on Sunday and pray for crop failure? That's pretty good, right? But what happens is we do that, and then we pray for crop failure, and then the plants come up, and destruction happens, and then we get mad at God for not answering our prayer for crop failure. You see that process? And most people are just in that loop all the time. I'm doing all the wrong things, and then we ask God, look, I know I'm doing some wrong things, but you can do all the right things, so just do all the right things. And then all our wrong things pop up over here, and they're worse than we thought. And then we're mad at God because he didn't do all the right things. And that's modern Christianity. So what we'd be better off to do is just admit that he's told us to live a certain way, and when we don't live that way, it leads to destruction. And eventually, he shows up and stops it. Sometimes in a good way, a very gracious, merciful way, and then sometimes because we're so rebellious, he has to bring the belt with him. Or I guess you could say the whip, since we're talking about Jesus. He did use a whip once. Y'all remember that story? He made a whip. When the creator of the universe makes a whip, that was a heck of a whip, I bet. He probably made it fast, but still, he's Jesus. Makes wine out of water. Come on. All right. Y'all could laugh a little more than you are. But all right, so that's the negative stuff. Here's the instructions, kind of a little bit of warning to it. He says, but to the rest of you, okay, so here's the good group, the rest of you in Thyatira, who do not hold to this teaching, talking about this Jezebel teaching, who have not learned what some call the deep things of Satan. One of the things I love about Revelation is you're reading along and you're kind of tracking, and he drops something like that in. And then he just keeps going. Like no explanation at all. At least in John's gospel, he'd like drop in a parenthesis like, oh, by the way, this was going on and this is what that word means. And he goes back into the story. In Revelation, he just drops that on you and keeps moving. I think because at the beginning of the book, he said some things are happening soon. I don't have time to explain it all. Do your research. Be a Bible nerd. That's what John wants you to do, okay? Which is what we're trying to do here. So what is this deep things of Satan? Well, there was a group in the first century that the disciples of Jesus had issues with very early on in church history, and they were called the Gnostics. So they followed this teaching called Gnosticism, and they were a jacked up bunch of people. They were mainly Greek background, so they had a lot of Greek philosophy that they still wanted to hang on to, but they liked this story of Jesus, so they hang on to that too, and they blend it together. That's what the Gnostics did. I don't have time to go into all the stuff, but their beliefs on the Bible was that the Old Testament God is an evil God, and the New Testament God that Jesus calls his Father is a good God. The reason they believe that is because they believed the Greek philosophy teaching that anything physical is bad and anything spiritual is good. So because the God in the Old Testament created a physical world, they considered him to be the bad God, and the one in the New Testament who brought the Spirit to mankind to be the good God. So that's what Gnosticism was teaching. They claimed to be Christian. And they had a lot of issues about this. There's a lot of first century documents that I won't bore you with, but they talk about this all the time. John himself had to deal with Gnostics within the churches in Asia Minor because John died in Ephesus, so he's dealt with these people. This is probably what this is about, because the whole idea behind Gnosticism was secret knowledge, the deep things. That's how they described themselves. We have the deep things of God, the secret things of God. And when Jesus wants to talk about them, they say, no, you have the deep things of Satan. That's what you have. Like, you're deep, but you're like that way deep. You're deep in the wrong direction. You're so deep you're hanging out with the devil. Okay, you got the wrong things on your mind. So that's probably what this is about. And that Jezebel woman, prophetess, false prophet, was probably a Gnostic. Because it's really the only way we can connect these things. So that's what that's about. Now he says, to the rest of you who haven't done all this crazy stuff, to you I don't lay anything else on you, any other burden. Only hold fast what you have until I come. So to me, and a lot of scholars agree with this, it sounds like to me that he's saying, look, you don't have much left in your church to hang on to, but hang on to what you got. That sounds bad, doesn't it? But he's telling the faithful ones, he's like, look, your church is pretty much done. But you, who aren't following these crazy teachings, you hang on to your love and your faith and your service and your patient endurance. Just hang on to it. Hold fast. Be glued to it. The word hold fast in your New Testament, the Greek behind that means to be glued or fastened together. So that's the instruction. All right. Now, if you fell asleep, wake up. This is the good part. Okay. To the one who conquers, and remember that's a pattern. That's really one of the main themes of Revelation. To the one who conquers or overcomes, and who keeps my works until the end. Okay, so that's faithfulness. To him I will give authority over the nations, and he will rule them with a rod of iron. Okay. Him who? Who is him? Half of you are saying Jesus, and a few of you said the faithful followers. Who is him? I got to this part of the passage this week and realized I had been misreading this. Now, up to this point in your Bible, the one who has authority over the nations and rules them with a rod of iron is Jesus, right? He's the king. He's going to rule the nations. He's the king of the kingdom, right? And he'll rule them with a rod of iron. And there's all these Old Testament, I put it in your notes somewhere. There's all these Old Testament passages that tell you that. Psalm 2, all kinds of. Now, but in this passage, if you'll notice, if we keep reading, he'll rule them with a rod of iron, as when earthen pots are broken in pieces. In other words, it's a conquering thing. Even as I myself have received authority from my Father. So who is him? It's the one who conquers. What? Wait a minute, I thought Jesus had authority over the nations and he was going to rule with a rod of iron. But in this passage it says, to the one who conquers, I will give him, the faithful followers of Jesus, authority over the nations and to rule. Is that not cool to you? What's he doing here? He's promising to share his authority and his power with his followers. That's us. If we're faithful, if we stay faithful to the end, he promises that we get to partner with Jesus in his ruling of the nations. Now, if you fast forward in your Bible to the end, to the last chapter, you find the new creation, right? And in this new creation, we are face to face with God. And there's no temple. There's no need for a temple because God's there. He's there in the whole creation. So this is like a look forward to what's coming. Now we are already, let me just say this. In Revelation, there's an already and there's a not yet. There's certain things in here that are already true spiritually and will be totally true in the future. Okay, that's an important concept, already and not yet. The kingdom is already here, and there's stuff about it that's not yet here yet. Not yet here yet. Okay, so the already and not yet is a very important thing for you to have stuck in your head when you read the New Testament. Okay, when Jesus showed up on earth, he said, repent, for the kingdom of God is here or near. The word means right here where you can grab it. It's here. So the kingdom came when the king showed up, and it's been here ever since, and it's been spreading, right? But there's a not yet side to this. It's not perfect yet. It's not completely done, okay? So that's already and not yet. You get it? The same thing's going on here. We are already in authority over the nations. Did you know that? Ephesians chapter 2, you have been raised to life and seated with Christ. Where's Christ sitting? At the right hand of God. That's the throne. You've been seated, you have been, past tense, seated with Christ. You already have this. But if we stay faithful to the end, one day in the new creation, it'll be perfect. You will rule with Christ. That's what this is about. This is good news, isn't it? Yeah? So, this, I used to say this a lot, man, if I could just, like people want a mansion in heaven, but I'm happy with like a cardboard box in the corner. I just want to be there. I've said that a lot. But my Bible keeps telling me that that's not how this works. There's not different tiers and separations of classes in heaven. There's not people living in boxes and people in mansions. By the way, the word mansion is not in that passage that everybody likes to say mansions are in. It's in my Father's house. There are many places to live. There's plenty of room, right? So the idea that you're going to have a mansion, That's a worldly concept. Jesus was homeless. Let's stop loving mansions, okay? The new creation, there's not a separation of classes. In the new creation, if you made it there, you are a co-ruler with Christ in the new creation. And right now we're all going, okay, cool. Because we can't even fathom what that's going to be like. But this is really good news. Really good news. In all other religions, by the way, there's nothing like this. In all other religions, there's nothing like this. Even the other concepts of heaven in other religions, there's still different classes of people. And in Islam, if you murder people for your faith and you died in the process, then you get 70 lady slaves, sex slaves in heaven. That's what they call heaven. Doesn't seem like heaven to those 70 ladies, does it? I guess it's hell for them. Right? You see how our faith just seems to work, seems more doable to me. Right? So we get to be co-rulers with Christ. You are now, but not yet. You have spiritual authority now. You can drive out evil in your house now. But in the future, we'll be actual co-rulers with all of his authority. It'll be perfect. Okay, he says, so I'm going to give you authority and rulership and all that. Oh, I left this out. This is really important. This is not a new concept in your Bible. This comes from Genesis chapter 1 on day 6 of creation. If you go back to Genesis chapter 1, verse 26, it says this, and God said, let us make man in our own image, after our likeness, and let him have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth. Dominion. That's rule. So what is this saying? Well, that's a preview. In the new creation, it will be like it was in the beginning. Except this time we're not going to mess it up. That's good news, isn't it? I mean, have you read the Bible story? Everybody messes it up every time. Except for that one Jesus guy. He got it right. Right? But everybody else in the story blows it every time. Right? That's actually what the writers are, what the Spirit is doing through the writers in the Bible, is trying to say, here's a good guy. Don't you think he's good? Doesn't he look good? Nope. Here's a good guy. Doesn't he look good? And you're reading along and you're like, wow, he might actually be the one who will crush the head of the snake. And then, nope, he got drunk and was laid naked in his tent and all this weird stuff happened. Okay, well, he's not the guy. That was Noah, by the way. And you just keep reading through, and it's like the authors are intentionally telling you how bad everybody is until you get to Matthew. And all of a sudden the story changes, and now there's a guy who's not messing it up, right? And then in the end of the book, we're back in the garden. We're going from garden to garden, except we're not going to be able to mess it up in the end. That's good, isn't it? I really like that I can't mess it up. Yeah, you messed up anything in your life? It's going to be a good day when we can't mess up. Yeah. All right. Well, I'm a lot more excited about that than you. So maybe y'all need to mess up some more. Be thankful. Okay. So he says, the other thing I'll do is I'll give him, this is the conqueror, the people who conquer, I'll give him the morning star. Okay. Remember, Revelation's full of symbols. So what we have to do is when we get to something weird, we're like, what is that? Well, we have these like iPads and phones and computers now where you can just search in your Bible for morning star. And then you can just read the passages that mention that, and it'll start making sense to you. It's wonderful. Technology is beautiful for this. So if you were to do that search, you would find out that in Numbers 24:17, it talks about a star shall come out of Jacob, and a scepter, that's like a king's scepter, shall rise out of Israel, and it shall crush the forehead of Moab, which was the evil nation, and break down all the sons of Sheth. So this is a reference to Jesus. He's the morning star, who's the ruler, the king. So how is Jesus gonna give us Jesus? Well, if you were to ask John this, John would say, yes. That's exactly what Jesus wants to do, is to give you some more Jesus. Right? So we're going to rule with him and be co-rulers with him. We already are, and then it will be even better later. And we'll get more of Jesus, who's called the morning star repeatedly in the Old Testament. And if you fast forward, if you were reading this in Thyatira in the first century and you got to that part and you didn't know your Old Testament, the good news is you could read the end of Revelation and Jesus calls himself the Son of David and the bright morning star. That's in Revelation 22:16. So even you could read to the end and go, oh, there's that morning star thing. He said something about that back in that letter to us. Go back and read, and okay, he's going to give us authority and he's going to give us himself. Right? So this John, in John's gospel, which I can't wait to teach through John's gospel. It'll take forever, but it's going to be awesome. He has this part where Jesus is talking about the Spirit, and it's very wordy, and you have to really read it slow. But Jesus is saying, and I think it's in his high priestly prayer in John 17, he's praying that the Father will give the Spirit to his disciples, and he says, I pray that they will be in me as I am in you, and you in me as you are in them, and they will be in us as we are in them. Like, you have to really slow down. It's like, this is like a circle, right? And I will be in you, and you be in them, and they will be in me, and then they will be in us. And that's exactly what John wants you to do. He wants you to go, wait, this is like a circle. And John would go, yep. Yeah, I want you to be as close to God as Jesus is. Jesus prayed that you would be as close to the Father as he is to the Father. And then you get to this part and it says, I don't just want to give you authority to rule the new creation. I want to give you me. I will be in you. And you will be in me. And we will be in him, the Father. And he will be in me, and then we will be in you. And us. And them. And they. Like all my pronouns. These are good pronouns, right? And then he ends by saying, he who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches, which is, do what I said. That's pretty much what that means. If you have an ear and you heard what I said, do it. All right? Okay, here's the application for today, and we'll stop for questions. Good works are necessary. Yes? Yeah, we're supposed to be doing good works. If we're saved, we will be doing good works. We don't do works to be saved, because you can't do enough of them. We do good works because we are saved. So if you really are saved, you'll be doing good works. So they're necessary. But those good works can often replace our love for God and others. We can get so tied up in the good works in our working for God that we start leaving God out. Okay? My name's Kurt, and I've done this. All right? This is the AA meeting for this situation. I know exactly how to do this. You can be so busy for God that you forget about him. Right? If you think of this, if you think of our relationship with him like a marriage, then you can make sense out of some of this stuff. Marriage is designed to be relational, right? But what happens is we get so busy. Sometimes we get so busy doing things for our spouse that we start to lose the relationship with our spouse, right? So in the same way, in our relationship with God, we're the bride of Christ, so this marriage thing really works out nicely. In our relationship with him, we can get so busy trying to do things for him that we forget to spend time with him. That's the relational part. So yes, do the good works, but don't forget about him. Yes? And then the other thing that happens with good works is if we're not careful, and it's so hard to see this in the mirror, we will use those good works as an excuse not to spend time with Him. Well, I'm going to church. Well, I read my Bible. I did my Bible reading plan for the day, and I checked that box. And I gave some money. I checked that box. And then, I gave that poor person some money in town this week, so I checked that box. And, I serve in my church in some way, and we checked that box. And God's going, yeah, but we hadn't hung out in a long time. So all that stuff is good and everything. Keep it up. But this is what I want. I want time. Just like in your relationships, somebody doing things for you is nice. But someone who wants to be with you is better. Right? Even if you're not a very relational person. If people just do stuff for you, but they don't really want to be with you, that would be a problem. Same thing in our relationship with God. We get tied up doing a lot of things for Him, and sometimes that ends up replacing our time with Him. And I can tell you from experience, that will wreck you eventually. So be careful. The other one, moral and religious compromise invites harsh judgment and devastating consequences. We talked about this some last week about tolerating things in the church that shouldn't be tolerated. That doesn't mean we're a bunch of angry people beating people over the head with a Bible. That's not what it means. It means when we see something going on that's destructive, we're supposed to go try to rescue someone from destruction. We shouldn't just stand by and then go, well, that sucks for them. Right? I mean, James talks about this in his letter. He talks about it in seeing like a poor person or a widow or someone who's suffering. He's like, what good is it to see that going on and go and be warm and well fed? Walking off. If he were speaking in American church terms, he would have said, we're praying for you. And we go on and don't do anything to help, right? We do the same thing when it comes to moral issues or religious or doctrinal issues. Somebody's way off base morally or in what they think they believe, and we just kind of stand by and we're like, I don't really want to, I'm a peacemaker. I don't want to get involved. And if you were here Sunday, you would know how stupid that sounds. Peacemakers go make peace, right? And blessed are the peacemakers. And they're also persecuted for being peacemakers, but live with it. So we shouldn't be tolerating certain things. We should be trying to rescue people from their sin. James also says at the end of his letter, all this is coming to me, so sorry. At the James chapter 5, towards the end of the chapter, he says, remember this, that if you go and turn someone away from their sin, you have saved them from death. And you can cover all kinds of unrighteousness in the process. That word cover is a very Jewish term. It's what the atonement was doing in the Old Testament. It's covering over sin. Okay. The last thing, Jesus rewards faithfulness by sharing his throne, power, and authority. We end up being co-rulers just like Adam and Eve were supposed to be in the garden. They were supposed to be co-rulers with God, and they blew it. They weren't faithful. But if we're faithful and we stick with Jesus, he'll give us more of himself and more of his Spirit and more of the Father, and we'll get to reign and rule with him in the new creation. That's a good future, right? Okay, next week we're going to do the church at Sardis. This is a pretty cool place. There's some really neat pictures I can't wait to show you about Sardis. It's a neat place. It's a pretty short letter. It's only 6 verses. Okay, look at me. It's only 6 verses. You have a week. You can read a verse a day. Like, read it. Right? I mean, the whole point of Wednesday night is learning to read your Bible. And we get here and we're like, hey, how many of you read the passage? Okay, well, this will all be new to you. 6 verses. Okay, so just read it this week. And then I'll post a video of the guys going to the ancient city of Sardis and talking about that. It's a really interesting video, so check that out. That's what we'll do next week.